The former Brexit activist Nigel Farage hopes to beat the Conservative Tories in the British general election on July 4th. The former UKIP leader is betting on the issue of migration here. "This is the election about immigration," is what Farage wrote on X, and according to a YouGov poll, immigration is indeed the third biggest concern of the British. The economy and health are top of the list at 51 and 45% respectively. Migration and asylum reached 40%, that's the highest since the referendum on leaving the EU in 2016, a campaign that relied heavily on anti-immigration arguments. Keir Starmer's Labour Party has been more than 20 percentage points ahead of the Conservatives in the polls since Prime Minister Rishi Sunak took office in October 22. The parties have not yet published their election manifestos when I'm filming this. However, Labour is expected to focus on economic and health issues during the election campaign, with migration issues playing a secondary role. While voters' main interests lie elsewhere, the Conservative government's persistent efforts to pass their law to deport irregular migrants and asylum seekers to Rwanda have taken up much of the newspapers at the time. The bill sparked outrage from human rights and refugee organizations and a Supreme Court battle. Nevertheless, there are attempts by various European politicians to copy it, with a little difference although. Although both Sunak and Farage are campaigning on the issue of migration, they appear to be targeting different audiences. Sunak's Rwanda model aims to stop people from entering the UK in ways that many UK refugee organizations consider illegal. The three main nationalities of irregular migrants and asylum seekers crossing the English Channel in small boats are Vietnamese, Albanians, and Afghans. And according to the UK Home Office, the number fell from almost 46,000 in 22 to just under 30,000 in 23. But the figures for 24 suggest an upwards trend. In a recent interview with Sky News, Farage focused on less specific groups though: Muslims who reportedly do not speak English, and the Conservatives who have said they have not done enough to reduce legal and illegal immigration. A graph shown during the interview showed the main countries of origin of immigration in 23 and the EU figures, which represent a dramatic change compared to 2019. Most notably, the number of EU citizens living in the UK did fall by about 75,000 in 23, and in the same year, more than 500,000 immigrants came from India, Nigeria, Pakistan, Zimbabwe, and Ghana. Farage's party is now in third place with 14% of the vote. That's 5 points behind the Conservatives and 2 points ahead of the Liberal Democrats. However, the share of votes in the British majority voting system, first past the post, does not guarantee entry into Parliament, especially not for smaller parties. British voters are yearning for change, and Keir Starmer could deliver it. He is running as Labour leader in the UK election, and the chances are good. Unless a bigger miracle happens, opposition leader Keir Starmer will move into 10 Downing Street on July 5th as the first Labour Prime Minister in 14 years, and 100 years after the first Labour Prime Minister was in British history. In the current polls for the UK election, his party is, as I said, around 20 percentage points ahead of that of Rishi Sunak, who recently announced somewhat surprisingly that the election would take place in July. Labour's lead is mainly due to the enormous anger at the Conservatives. Many people do not yet know what the party stands for. Starmer recently presented a 6-point emergency program. He wants to ensure economic stability, reduce waiting times in the NHS, create a new command structure for border protection, establish a national energy company, tackle antisocial behavior, and employ 6,500 new teachers. Starmer promises the British nothing less than change here, and according to experts, many voters are banking on Labour bringing a new tone to the government, and the chaos of recent years with the changing prime ministers, the frequent scandals and the constant changes of ministers, that this was finally coming to an end. After the last Labour Prime Minister Gordon Brown, who was in office from 2007 to 2010, the Tory Prime Ministers David Cameron, Theresa May, Boris Johnson and Liz Truss were in charge. And then Rishi Sunak took over, who was just as unlucky as his predecessors. Sir Keir Starmer's strategy is to reassure the public that the biggest risk this time is keeping a discredited government in office. That's how political scientist Mark Garnett from Lancaster University told it to the German press agency. Even though Starmer is generally considered to be colourless and downright boring, it seems to be exactly what many Britons are longing for, says Garnett. The Social Democrats have often been in the shadow of the Conservatives. Starmer would be only the 7th Labour Prime Minister in history. Born out of the Labour movement, the Labour Party united the left-wing movements when it was founded in 1900. From the beginning, it has been closely linked to the trade unions, which still have a lot of influence today. The former lawyer Starmer has been the leader of His Majesty's most loyal opposition since April 2020, as the head of the largest opposition party in the British House of Commons is traditionally called. He took over the Social Democrats from Jeremy Corbyn, who lost the 2019 British election by a landslide to then Prime Minister Boris Johnson. From Corbyn's very left-wing positions, Starmer has led the party back to the political centre. At first, however, things did not go well. After a defeat in a by-election to the British Parliament in the northeast English Labour stronghold of Hartlepool in May 2021, Starmer wanted to quit, as he recently admitted. But many scandals under Conservative Prime Ministers Johnson and Liz Truss brought him new support. Recently, Starmer has also adopted moderate conservative positions, using the space that the Tories' right-wing cause leaves him. The former head of the CPS, like his competitor Sunak, is not considered a rousing speaker, but many people appreciate the father of 2 teenage children for his down-to-earth nature, his calmness and his sensitivity. In his private life, Sir Keir, as he's been able to call himself for several years, is a big fan of the London Premier League football team Arsenal and plays football with his friends as often as possible. Starmer repeatedly emphasizes that he has completely revamped Labour. While anti-Semitic accusations arose under Corbyn against the party, which traditionally sympathizes strongly with the Palestinian movement, Starmer is taking a clear stance against anti-Israeli comments. He clearly denounced the terror of the Islamist Hamas against Israel. However, there are still MPs or candidates who speak disparagingly about Israel. In one such case, at the beginning of February, Labour stopped supporting its original candidate in the parliamentary by-election in Rochdale near Manchester, even though it was no longer allowed to name a replacement candidate. Shortly afterwards, a survey showed that around 40% of people believed that the party was still struggling with anti-Jewish prejudices. In Corbyn's shadow cabinet, Starmer acted as his party's Brexit spokesman. In contrast to the party leader at the time, he campaigned for a second referendum to reverse the EU exit. However, he has since made it clear that he sees no way back into the EU. Although he wants to get closer to the Union again, and such hopes are regularly heard from the EU as well, Starmer has so far rejected rejoining the EU customs union or the internal market. Maybe he knows how hard that would be. The reason is probably that the Labour leaders fears losing important votes in the traditionally EU-critical north of Great Britain, and all of this so-called red wall that they lost to the Tories in 2019 because of Brexit. Nevertheless, the election is only over when it's over, and until then a lot still can happen. But we will see how this will end. And if you want to know more, the next video is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.